we learn LinkedIn the wrong way, that we think that we have to have something happen to be able to post about it on LinkedIn. We have to get a settlement or a verdict. Your experience can be mined for gold that can be shared. The key there is that, yeah, you got the result. That's all well and good. But so much of the value, so much of the things that create the connection is showing the process.
Hey everyone, Bo Royal here, co-founder and CEO of Pareto Legal, a marketing agency that helps injury lawyers increase their profits with digital strategy, online advertising, and analytics. You're listening to the Pareto Legal podcast, where we feature world-class attorneys, entrepreneurs, and legal experts. And today I'm joined by Tony Albrecht, founder of Contender, a premier LinkedIn ghostwriting agency for legal professionals. In this episode, we'll be discussing all things LinkedIn for lawyers and law firms, from how lawyers are using LinkedIn to bolster their networks to tips on how to get the most out of your LinkedIn posts. Tony, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
I appreciate the invite, Bo.
Awesome. So let's get this started. So first question for you is, you've obviously been working with a multitude of firms over the last couple of years. Why do you believe LinkedIn is such an underutilized platform in legal marketing?
The way I describe this is basically, if you are a lawyer, you learned LinkedIn the wrong way. That's not true just for lawyers. I think that's true for just about all of us. I practiced for 12 years or so and more or less ignored the platform throughout my career in law. It was only after I moved to Canada, thanks to my Canadian wife, in 2021, left the practice and took on a business development role in another industry, that I started looking at LinkedIn from a different perspective, from the seller's perspective. I started dabbling in more the marketing and selling corners of the platform. And eventually something just sort of flipped, where the platform opened up in this new way for me. And I describe it as almost a Matrix-like moment, right? Where it's just suddenly it was like I knew kung fu and how to collect attention and direct it on LinkedIn. And to your question, Bill, that's the potential here. Is we all have a LinkedIn profile because we all feel like we have to, right? It's the world's biggest professional networking site. That said, we also are all worried about saying something that's going to get us ostracized, criticized, or fired. And so we tend to not express ourselves as we are. We tend to express ourselves the way that we think that other people would expect somebody who has that job title to communicate. And so there's this sort of trying to fit that round peg in a square holes that happens for so many of us, that leads to a platform that is full of, I'm humbled and thrilled to announce, or just sharing company press releases. That stuff is fine. It's not particularly interesting. So when you're looking for an edge in your marketing, here you have this platform where everybody is, all this attention is gathered. And because we all learned the platform the wrong way, almost nobody is leveraging it. So you've got this supply-demand problem. The LinkedIn algorithm has a tremendous demand for engaging stuff, and it has almost none of it to show. That's why it's so easy. If you can show up and be, the way I describe it, consistent, generous, and genuine, it's fairly straightforward to get a disproportionate amount of attention on the platform.
The way that you do that, from what you've said, is it sounds like being more authentic, genuine, doing what everyone else isn't doing, right? Because a lot of firms and lawyers are checking the box of LinkedIn, but they're not doing it in a way that is authentic, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that goes to what I was saying about this idea that we're trying to fit ourselves into the box of what we think somebody in our position would put out there. And it's true for individual lawyers, it's true for firms. So yeah, a lot of firms do check the box. Most of them tend to use the company page, and they don't do anything on the personal page. That's one big mistake people make. you could run, the a similar playbook to what you've done if you are running content through your or through your firm's page, where if you just flip that funnel, say, okay, that you put that stuff on, let's say the firm owner's page, and then you funnel it back, you share it back to the firm page, your reach and your engagement will both increase just by default, just because of how the algorithm is. But the real opportunity is if you're willing to be different. And the best way to be different is not necessarily about saying why you are the best, right? It's about being yourself. Because there are things about each of us and our businesses and our practices that make us a little different from everybody else. And it's by leaning into those things, those aspects of ourselves, that our stuff, the message, the posts we put out there have a chance to cut through the noise and connect with the people we want to talk to.
I wish I talked to you a couple of years ago. On a personal level, my agency, we did the whole, let's post on the company LinkedIn page. And that's where we're going to just, post videos and share thought leadership and things like that. We did that for like 6-12 months and got.
Did it work?
No.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Didn't work at all.
I ask because I have strong opinions on this, but I'm a student of this game, right? And I'm always looking for examples of people doing stuff that is different than I would do that is also working. But I'm glad to hear that it didn't work.
It didn't work. And what we ended up doing was customizing the content for my own personal profile. And we're following the playbook that you just described, where it's like the content is now coming from me, and then the company page will interact with, repost that content. So I get, that I get to piggyback off of my company page's followers, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely does. But in terms of organic reach, you're just going to get more organic just off the bat from going with the personal page first. Ultimately, it's that idea that part of this is like, I would say, human psychology, but part of it's also algorithmic, where the LinkedIn algorithm simply will not spread company stuff. It just doesn't happen. And also there's that idea that people like doing business with people. So if you're able to show yourself as like being a decent, solid person, then people can just, that know, like, trust, you're able to build that kind of connection that leads to opportunities.
You just took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, and this was the realization I had at the time, people want to hear from other people. They don't want to hear from a brand or a company, whatever that is, right? So, yeah, like I said, wish I spoke to you a couple of years ago. I could have figured that out sooner. So you mentioned something earlier about how LinkedIn is incredibly powerful for awareness, and that's certainly something that I've observed. To what extent does LinkedIn content directly drive cases or referrals for law firms, and how long does that take? I guess another way to think about it is like when a law firm comes to you or a lawyer comes to you, how are you framing the conversation around goals and expectations?
It's only been very recently that I have started to think of myself as a marketer at all. I'm basically a lawyer who accidentally got good at LinkedIn. That's who I am. So I got pretty comfortable very early on saying, I don't do lead gen. I don't know how to do lead gen. I don't care to do lead gen. I can't actually tell you how this stuff works or what's going to happen when we do this. All I know, it works. And so, it's the difference between lead gen and demand gen, right? Where, and you know more about all this stuff than I do, Bo. So correct me if I say anything incorrect. But, I think about it as the difference between funnels and magnets. The lead gen is about, you've got your funnel, you're trying to dump as many leads in as you can in the hope that you are increasing the number of clients who come out the bottom end of the funnel. What I've been all about and what I help my clients and the people I work with is becoming magnetic online. which is to say you are putting yourself out there with a level of clarity and a level of conviction that you are attracting the people that you're interested in engaging with, the people who want what you have. And so when it comes to metrics, when it comes to deliverable results, I'm still trying to figure out how I can measure more. It's like I have the analytics on how our content performs. I see the DM inboxes, I see what's happening there. I have plenty of receipts to show that we know what we're doing and that we are able to take somebody who has never shown up on LinkedIn before, and within a matter of weeks or months, you will have one of the strongest presences on LinkedIn of any lawyer in the world. I have receipt. I got the receipts. What I don't have, and I think this is inherent to the nature of dark social, right? Which is say that problem of attribution, like where does the lead actually come from? What I've found is that most of the clients I work with, they're pretty sophisticated, right? They've got their SEO, they've got their pay per click, they've got their, maybe they have TV or they got a newsletter, they've got community marketing in place, and they see the LinkedIn social piece, the personal branding piece as just another leg of that stool, a relatively unique way to get your your personal message and show your personality more than you can in basically any other channel. And so it's been interesting where most of the people I work with are out here looking for referrals. And so it's that's how they see LinkedIn. So they're talking, as opposed to most channels where you're looking to connect with that potential client directly. Out on LinkedIn, most attorneys I interact with are just trying to get in front of other lawyers so they're top of mind when they have a good case to refer. It's a different dynamic that I've been fortunate to have a lot of clients who are patient and appreciate what we're doing. But when it comes to actually having those metrics, I'm limited to, let's say, anecdotal. It's basically when my clients say, "Hey, somebody called," or somebody pinged me about it, based on LinkedIn.
I think that's the right way to approach the conversation, because this isn't like, my agency does a lot with, pay per click and local services ads and Facebook ads and things like that, right? Where the attribution is cut and dry. It's pretty clear. This falls under the camp of it's not going to ever have that level of granularity in terms of tracking, reporting attribution. In my mind, as someone that is regularly posting content on LinkedIn, I don't know with a high degree of precision if it's working or not. I know at a macro level, though, I've had a lot more networking opportunities as a result of the content I've been posting. I've met a lot more people than I would have had I not, been active on LinkedIn. I know that it builds trust and authority with my audience. They see me as more of a thought leader. They see me as a trusted resource. And so, you could go crazy trying to assign an ROI to that. I see this almost as it's kind of like going to the gym, like you just got to put your reps in and be consistent with it. And you'll wake up one day and you'll be like, oh, wow, I'm pretty strong now. I can lift heavy things. I can run 5 miles, right? It's something that if you're not putting the reps in, you're just going to be left behind, and you're not going to be in a place of strength from a branding perspective.
That's perfectly said. Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. And to your point about those benefits you've been seeing, that is how I describe it, is that if you think about LinkedIn as a real network where you are a node, Bo, I am a node. We're talking about Ron Latz before we got on there. Ron is a node who connected us to have this conversation. When we're talking about like pay per click or LSAs, where those things where it's like it's a tactic that can have a very direct ROI. What we're talking about here is much more ephemeral and much less predictable. But, like our having this conversation here, like the the connection between you and I as two nodes in this LinkedIn network is I the way I picture it in my head is that when there's no connection, when you don't know each other, there's no line connecting the two, right? And up until today, you and I, let's say up until you invited me onto the podcast, there was like a very faint line there. And then you invited me on the podcast, that line gets clearer. And then after today, that line's going to be pretty bright, dude. Like you can call me and ask me for stuff and I will take your call and do the best I can to help you. And so it's because both you and I are making deposits into that network, right? And it's not simply like supporting one another, right? It's just you're posting on the network, you're talking to Ron, you're talking to this person, that person, and so am I. And so we're just connecting. And I always do this hand wavy thing of like how all those connections fly around. Unpredictable, very unscientific, but I'll be damned if it doesn't work. And it's not only do we actually grow a more dynamic, more powerful network, it actually, to your point about getting in shape, it feels good. And it feels good to do this. It feels good to be able to express ourselves. Like there's a level of confidence and clarity that comes with that. That's really powerful. The interpersonal relationships. I mean, it's insane to me how many of my friends in real life today are people I've connected with on LinkedIn over the last 3 years. It would not have computed if you had told me what my life looks like today 5 years ago. Would not make any sense to me at all. And then it's the last thing I'll say about this network effect is that I talk about making these deposits to build up your social capital balance. It's not a one-to-one thing. Like as you build your balance, the benefits that come, they compound in a way that is not proportionate. Like I have put a ton of time, energy, and effort into building my network, but the benefits I've gotten, like, it's incredible. Like, it's been unreal, and I've got a bunch of friends and clients where that has been true as well. So that's why I say, like, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how this works. I just know it works.
Right. And I think the takeaway there for someone that's hesitant to do something like this and that might be accustomed to more of those quick win, direct attribution type of marketing tactics, the point we're trying to make here is the benefits are immeasurable, so don't try to measure them, but it's something, to your point, that you have to consistently make deposits and almost not expect something in return, I guess, right? Like that's an important piece of this too, is like if you expect to make these deposits and then 2-3 months later you're like, gosh, I haven't gotten any referrals yet. That's not the right way to think about this.
No, that's why my strategy that I talk about is very simple. Be consistent, be generous, and be genuine, which goes back to 3 things we've already talked about. That idea of the gym, being consistent and getting the reps so that you're learning the territory and you're getting better at playing the game. The generosity piece is what you're zeroing in on there, Bo. And I think 100% that if we approach this transactionally, then not only is it probably not going to be effective, but it's going to suck to do it. And we're probably also going to be, well, let's say we'll be less effective. And for some of us, I would say, particularly if we're sellers, like if we're people who are looking for leads, chances are we're going to end up being annoying because it's going to manifest as we're going to send a ton of DMs to people who have no interest in talking to us, couldn't pick us out of a lineup. And I, I, I think that approach 3 years ago was maybe annoying and possibly was effective. I think today that approach is both annoying and I would say like it's probably approaching obsolescence and just like there's so much noise out there that it just doesn't work. So that generosity piece of saying like, how do I show up and actually just support people and just like contribute to conversations, it does feel better. And I promise it's more effective. It does take time, and it's weird. It's a weird thing. We didn't learn this stuff in school, right? It feels strange. But like if we're able to do that, and this is where that third piece, that be genuine, comes in, like it's the if we're thinking about it transactionally and like I am this lawyer, law firm owner, business owner, what seller, what have you, and I'm trying to make this sale, then we're thinking about it in this very linear way. Whereas if we think about it in terms of like, who am I? Who am I trying to be? Who am I trying to become? We're able to show up in more of a way where we're going to be more interesting. We're going to be more authentic. And that is inherently more attractive in a way that it just produces better results. This is simple, but not easy stuff, you know?
Agreed. And all well said. So I think we did a really good job of explaining to someone that might be on the fence or that's, been thinking about doing or building a presence on LinkedIn. What are some of the most common mistakes that you're seeing lawyers make on LinkedIn today?
So the biggest mistake is not contributing to conversations at all. It's to being those lurkers. That's number one. The second one is showing up in that way we talked about at the top of the show. It's that if you're posting, it is either sharing the company presser, or it's saying, I'm thrilled to announce, or just diatribe on a recent development, or maybe you're repurposing an SEO optimized blog post on your page. All of this stuff is better than doing nothing. But the problem is that none of it is interesting. It's just not particularly interesting. And so if you want to be getting more attention, which is how you can lead to opportunities, you need to be thinking about how you can be more interesting. I'd say those are the biggest things. And I'll throw a third one in there, a bonus. You know, I run these, I've started doing these boot camps I call the 1-5-10 boot camp trainings. And that 1-5-10 framework is on a weekly basis, to your point about the gym. We're aiming for 1 story driven post, 5 generous DMs, and 10 substantive comments a week. It's like a fairly light lift as a circuit. It's not a ton of time, but we're looking to, number one, so do more interesting posts. That's the story driven piece. And then comments and DMs. It's a mistake that a lot of us make is we think that it's just about the posts, saying like, I want to put the post out that brings me the results I want, right? And so this goes back to the generosity piece, that to be more effective, it's thinking less about LinkedIn as a billboard of sorts, and it's thinking more in terms of how do I move in this space in a way that creates momentum, that creates connection, that builds relationships. And it's through doing those things that you're actually able to create more opportunities. So there's that aspect of ignoring the comments and ignoring the DMs as, let's say, avenues for moving the ball.
I love that. This is one of those podcasts where like I'm learning a ton and as someone that again that posts a lot on LinkedIn, I've made the mistake of thinking of it like that billboard that you mentioned, and it's like just okay, I got to do a daily post, I got to do this. I can outsource this to my EA. She can comment on all these different things. It's like, yeah, sure, that might get me some more impressions and it might get me a few more follows. But what you're really referring to here is just like make sure that there's more depth to some of this stuff.
What I would say is, and don't beat yourself up too much, because what you're doing a solid job, and you are, I would say, let's say in the top 1% of people out there in terms of how you're leveraging it, right? You are, in terms of that bell curve of adoption, you're way toward the front. You're doing well, but we're leaving a lot on the table with that. Like there's more to it. And this is where we get into that territory I'd describe more as social selling. And or you could call it as thinking more of like networking on the if you're not trying to sell, then let's call it more networking, right? Where it's how do I show up on the platform in a way that it becomes more of a two-way street that we are that we are like again strengthening those bonds between people because that's where the thing can really become a superpower. Whereas what you're doing, I I no, I think I know that that can be effective as a way to drive business. Like what you're doing, you are already toward the absolute top end of producers out there. So it's a matter of like you're already doing well, and there's like a level where things can really start to get interesting.
Well, I'm going to try the 1-5-10 method now because I think it's definitely been lacking from at least my content. But I wanted to ask, just while we're still on this topic, what lawyers do you think are doing LinkedIn really well? Like, what are good examples? If you have any at the top of your head, like, I'd love to know, like, who are some, like, two or three that are really using the platform the right way, in your opinion?
The people who come to mind immediately, Darrell Champion out of Georgia, Christopher Early out of Massachusetts, and then Brian Glass out of Virginia. Those three I put in a category of like daily posters. Like those very few lawyers are posting every day. I think those three are really solid examples of how to do that well, where they are very consistent, they're very genuine, and they really are. All three of those guys, when you're interacting with them, it's them, right? It's, like a lot of people do have EAs helping, or, like you'll have ghostwriters and like they do a really good job. That said, the vast majority of people do not have the time or inclination to post every day. And for my clients, my roster, we don't post for anybody more than twice a week. And we found that to be good. And that's great. Is the truth is, I think for most lawyers, a lot of them don't want to be seen as somebody who would be posting on LinkedIn every day or spending an hour plus on LinkedIn every day. Right? You have to be in a certain position where that's even something that's appealing to you. Emily Logan Stedman, she works on the defense side for a fairly big firm. I think she's out of Milwaukee, I want to say. And she writes about living that firm life and wellness from a defense perspective. She posts typically, I would say 2-3 times a week. And she does a hell of a job in what is, I would say, a really challenging environment of doing that when you are in that big law setting. But again, as somebody who's trying to be useful to other people and shows up as herself. Um, who do you look at in terms of people doing a really good job?
The first three people you mentioned, I've never met in person, and I know exactly who they are. So going back to your example about like we're all nodes and there's this whole network, the fact that those three individuals that you mentioned, I know them. Like I know I have to again use your analogy, I have a clear line drawn with Ben Glass. I've had him on the podcast. I've been on his podcast. I don't know. I haven't met Darrell Champion. I haven't met Chris Early, but I know who they are and I know what they're about. And I think that's part of the goal, right? Is to build that network. And so they clearly are doing it well. You mentioned their names and I know what they look like just from their profile photos and photos that they've shared. These lawyers, what makes them stand out is they're not, posting, just like, hey, here's a case we settled.
Mm-hmm.
Or, hey, Happy Thanksgiving from my law firm, right?
Yep.
They're providing in-depth, recountings of cases from the emotional impact it had on them to their client, all the inner workings. They talk about what it's like to be a business owner and what it's like to, you know, manage a team and all these things. Like they're sharing personal things about their lives that cut through the noise of LinkedIn. And it's like, wow, damn, this guy really is being open about what it's like to be a lawyer or a business owner. And, the engagement follows.
Yeah, that's really well said. And let's see if I can be useful to people, if no other reason than for what I'm about to say. Is what you're describing about what's effective about what they post is spot on. And that idea of they're not just saying, oh, we settled a case. With all of my clients, I have this tool we call your brand pyramid, and we try to figure out what is your corner of the internet, your piece of digital real estate you are out to claim and own. And part of that corner is what we call your territory. It's a combination of the topics you talk about, which you might call content pillars, and your point of view. And I think of those two as playing together. And when it comes to something like an announcement post, which is the one of the standard linky posts, we we think of it in terms of we are thrilled or humbled to announce that we just settled this case for or we just got this verdict. You can flip that, and Dahl does a great job of this, as Chris and a lot of people do a great job of this. Tell a story. Right? Take uh, that announcement, and instead of making that the headline, make it the punchline. What I'm looking for with my clients, whenever we get a big settlement or a verdict, I just ask, send me a voice note. We hop on the phone for 10 minutes, or you just tell me what's standing out to you from that trial. What are you going to remember 5 years from now about what happened here? And just walk me through that. And what I'm looking for is the most interesting, poignant, incisive line out of what you just said. And I'm popping that to the top. That's the hook of the post. The most interesting thing you just said. That's what we're leading with. Then we're going into laying the background of like, this was a case where dot, 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 dot. And then we're walking through what happened. And then the payoff of, the jury went out, they deliberated for this long, and then they came back and gave us their decision. Like that's the payoff. That's the punchline of the post. And it's a very simple framework that anybody can use. And the post is going to be better than any announcement post that you've done in that traditional way.
What do you think a lawyer should expect in terms of time investment with doing LinkedIn? And obviously working with a company like yours is going to, streamline and speed up that process and not make it as time intensive. So I guess it's almost two questions in one. What does it look like if they're working with someone like you? What are you setting in terms of expectations from a time perspective? Like, hey, I'm going to need an hour or two of your time a week to get this done. Is it less than that? Is it more than that? And then if they're not working with someone like you, realistically, what do you think that time investment's going to look like?
If you're working with a ghostwriter, well, if you're working with my agency, I estimate 2 hours a month. We have a content call every month, and then it's just a matter of reviewing and approving things, editing, sending back. We support with engagement stuff just to make sure that people are taken care of, and then we'll flag things when there's a comment that is like specific that requires some attention. Then we flag that, and like we do. I'm out here talking about being genuine, being authentic as I'm a ghostwriter. And I'm very mindful of that if I'm doing my job right, I'm not writing a post. I'm basically just capturing what my client is telling me, and then I'm reflecting it in a way that is crafted to do well on LinkedIn. And the same thing is true for the comments, that I don't want to be out there, me and my team, like pretending to be somebody else on the internet. That's not awesome. I'm trying to create opportunities just to reflect things that my clients believe, or to the better is that they're out there contributing themselves. If you're doing it on your own, I have, part of how I came to the 1-5-10 framework is you can execute on that in about an hour a week. Right? Like you can do that in about that amount of time. And it is, it's, if you want results faster, if you want to see traction faster, then pouring more time and attention, and I would say like you personally into it is probably the way to do that. If you are outsourcing it or having your support handle it, you can get some of those and I mean specifically, like if you have somebody sending out connection requests every day, then your follower count is going to be going up. The other stuff isn't necessarily going to be following, and I'm not sure that's giving you much of a bump in terms of, let's say you're standing in the network, which is how I think about it. If you really want to move needles, what you're aiming for is that you are increasing your standing in the network. And to do that, you need to be building credibility. And I loved how you described that about Darrell and Chris is, who they are. If God forbid, I'm, somebody I know is in an accident in Atlanta next week, I don't even have to think about it. Like I'm calling Darrell, right? Like it's just an automatic. And that's what we're going for. And he wouldn't be able to do that. And he's got some help now. Like you could tell he's like gotten more into doing some videos and some memes. And I think he and I are about the same age, which means we're a little too old for that stuff. He's got some help in what he's putting out there, but it's him. It's the messages, the engagement, like that's his stuff. And like that's the real power of all this stuff.
One thing I want to point out from your response, which was great, by the way, is for anyone that's listening that's kind of at the base of the mountain and they're like, oh gosh, I see all these other firms and they're posting all the time and they're putting content out. Like what Tony just said, it's like it's 2 to 4 hours a month is like really what the initial starting point in terms of time investment. And you mentioned like that you do these like content recording calls. Like that's sometimes the most effective mechanism to start getting everything up here onto, digital paper, so to speak. Attorneys are talking with clients all the time. They're dropping these knowledge bombs all the time. They're sharing personal stories with clients all the time. Like it's just kind of taking what you already know and just transcribing it into a different medium, right? And sometimes something as simple as a quick recording can be effective enough to do that. You don't have to sit down on the weekends and like just grind and grind and grind to try to write this stuff out. It's like, no, get the broad strokes, big things out of your head through a call, through a podcast, through, you could record yourself talking through it. You don't need to have someone else there with you. So that's the thing I'm telling my clients when I'm trying to push them to do things like video. Hey, like let's create an FAQ video. Let's do something like that. Like it's really not hard. You're saying what you already know is basically what I'm telling them.
That's spot on. And going back to what we were talking about we learn LinkedIn the wrong way, that we think that we have to have something happen to be able to post about it on LinkedIn. We have to get a settlement or a verdict or move offices or hire somebody, yada, yada, yada. Your experience can be mined for gold that can be shared. Is what we realize, and that announcement post framework that I just laid out there, like the key there is that, yeah, you got the result. That's all well and good. But so much of the value, so much of the things that create the connection is showing the process. And so even that framework that I laid out there it's about taking the results and downplaying the results and leading with the process, leading with the moment where things were not decided, where you did not know how this was going to go. As well, ask anybody who's started a business or any professional. Those mountaintops are pretty few and far between. And the moment you get to one, you realize, oh, there's a bigger mountain out there in the distance that we're heading to next, right? So we were able to enjoy those fairly briefly before it's time to get back to work. So there's this mindset shift where, to your point, Bo, you said it really well. Just share what you know, and you do know more than you think you do. It's just we're looking for those insights, those moments of that stand out to you, those stories that you tell when you're just talking shop. Like those are the things we're looking for.
Yep, agreed. You suggested before we recorded this that we do a lightning round, which I think is a great idea because I want to pull as much out of your brain as I can with the limited time we have left. So let's do 4 or 5 questions. I would say, if you can give like, a 10 to 20-second response, I think we can get a lot of knowledge out of this in a short period of time. And some of the stuff you already answered, but I want to re-ask the question just to make it as clear as day, like do this, don't do that, so on and so forth. And on that note, I'm going to ask the first question. So do you think it's more effective for a lawyer to build their personal brand or focus on promoting their firm page?
Personal brand. Yeah. That's you flip the funnel, share stuff back toward the company page. Nice. We did that in 10 seconds. Great.
If a lawyer is just starting out on LinkedIn, what's the first thing you'd have them do?
What I'm going to have you do is try to make your feed more interesting. That your feed sucks. And for you to be interested in spending more time, you need to get stuff that's more interesting. So when you see a post that is interesting, read it, click like. The algorithm is going to start showing you more stuff that looked like the thing you found interesting.
What types of posts are actually working on LinkedIn right now for lawyers? Is it text, carousel, video?
Now, video is hot right now. Text, images. Yeah, I'm doing more text only stuff than I was doing a year ago. I'm doing more video than I was a year ago. The trick is that you are zeroing in on those real insights and sharing those real stories. That's the key. It works in any format.
Similar question. What types of content is actually working right now on LinkedIn for lawyers? Thought leadership, case studies, personal posts?
My inclination is again to say yes. If you're talking about trying to get more reach, I've been finding more of the thought leadership, what I would describe as like the strong opinions or the deep dives into what you do. Those have been really juicy recently. And the straight personal stuff in terms of reach has been going less far than it might have 2 years ago as a result of seeing like LinkedIn about 18 months ago or so said, no, really, we don't want to be Facebook. And they started throttling that stuff. There's still a role for that kind of content, but it just know that it's not going to move as far typically.
Should lawyers use paid ads on LinkedIn to amplify their organic content, or should they just focus on organic?
So I have only focused on organic. This might be a better question for you. I think LinkedIn is a platform worth advertising on. It's something we are going to be experimenting with in Q2 here. I think you get closer to running into like advertising restrictions and those lines around the ethics rules. And that is not an area of expertise for me. So I don't think of myself as an authority on that question. You probably know more than I do about that.
We don't candidly do a lot with our clients on LinkedIn. The thing I'll say is it really comes down to what their goals are. If you want to run an ad on LinkedIn to try to bolster referrals, like you could do that. You could, identify a law firm or audience profile and be like, I want to serve this ad to, personal injury lawyers in these states and put a quick video ad and try to go that lead gen route. But I think probably the best use case for using ads in this context, in terms of what we've been talking about today, would be using like thought leadership ads, taking organic content that's worked really, really well, like that you've A/B tested, that's resonated well, and then just amplify that further.
Just this last 2 minutes has made me think about it a little deeper in a way that's like 100%. I will let you know once we start doing that, because now it's like, yeah, why wouldn't we spend some bucks on amplifying that stuff and just see what happens?
Yeah, I think if it's already working well from an organic perspective, why not just amplify it further from a paid? Last question. You've been dropping so many knowledge bombs in a short period of time. What cadence do you recommend posting?
For most people, once a week is fine. You don't need to think about LinkedIn as a part-time job. You don't need to think about posting every day. I actually think that with the rise of AI, all of a sudden, quantity is no longer an indicator of quality. In a world where anybody can post 5 times a day, I think they tweak the algorithm in a way that the algo now assumes that your stuff is AI generated if you're posting every day. I don't know if that's me speculating, but what I have seen, in this time where everybody's talking about how reach is down, my roster, our reach is not down. Our reach is as strong as it's ever been, and I think that's why, because as opposed to trying to do quantity, trying to go for volume, where there's upside to that, and that you're giving yourself more swings, which gives you more chances to hit a home run. But if you're somebody who doesn't have unlimited resources or time to put into LinkedIn content, I encourage you to focus on making good stuff. And if that's just one post a week, or one post even every other week, that's just good, do that.
Tony, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. Where can our listeners learn more about you and your company?
LinkedIn, for sure. Come check me out on the profile, and you can find my links to our boot camps, my Linked Legal membership community, and the other stuff we've got going on.
Yeah, for those listening on the podcast, we'll make sure to drop links on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. And Tony, thank you again for doing this. For our listeners, thank you for joining today, and we'll see you next time for another episode.